time once again for Community Forum. And we are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning, Aisha Jumaan. Aisha Jumaan is the founder and president of the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, and we're going to be talking about Yemen this morning. Aisha, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
So give us some history of how you came to creating your foundation.
The Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation was established in August 2017. And the reason for that is there is a war in Yemen that's been going on since 2015, March 2015, when Saudi Arabia and a group of other Arab nations started an air campaign against a group in Yemen that took over the government. And in addition to the air campaign, they also had a blockade on Yemen. And the blockade is still ongoing, which made life very difficult for people because access to food became very scarce. They allow about 20% of what should be into Yemen each year. And with successive years, we can see that the amount of food and essential goods, including medicine, becomes very little in the country. So initially, when that happened, 2015, I used my own funds and called people I know in Yemen in the different areas that were heavily targeted and gave them the funds. And I said, please buy food basket and distribute it to people. So that was 2015. And I really didn't think this was going to go on for longer than, a few months. And then in 2016, the war is still ongoing. The siege is still in place. So I reached out to people I know for contributions, and in 2016, we raised about $70,000 just from close friends and from my own funds. And again, we sent it to Yemen so people can buy food baskets to the most needy. We reach places that nobody can reach because our volunteers are from Yemen and are from these communities. So they're able to get to every single village. And I also get reports from the UN on the status of malnutrition in Yemen and severe malnutrition. And sometimes I get it from people in Yemen directly. So I target places where we get a lot of information about severe malnutrition. And then once 2017 was again there, and a lot of people this time were reaching out to me and asking me, how do we contribute? We want to help. With that, I realized I was getting a lot of money into my private account, and I cannot do that anymore. So that's when, in August, I established the Yemen Relief Reconstruction Foundation, registered it here in Washington as a nonprofit. We also submitted an application to be a 501c3 organization as well. And since then, we were able to get just between August and December from when we established it, over about $60,000 in donations just in the 4 or 5 months. And now this year, 2018, we are now, registered as a nonprofit, but also as a charity organization in Washington. We're also registered in Yemen because that's very important for us to be able to send money to Yemen. And this year, to date, we've raised about $200,000. Just again, from people who know about our work and who reached out to us. We haven't done any campaigns to get funding, but just people reading the news and people who know about our work, they reach out and make donations. We have 2 co-sponsors who are 510c3 organizations. One here is in Seattle and one is in Atlanta, Georgia. And those organizations also accept donations for us, for people who want to have a tax break from those donations. We average about 600 families that we reach with our food baskets. The food baskets normally contain enough goods to support a family of 7 for 1 month. And initially the cost was about $30, and now it's $35 because, again, fuel and everything is getting very expensive. And we buy locally. So if we are distributing, let's say, in Hodeidah, we buy from Hodeidah because we don't want to have to worry about shipping to the place where we're distributing. In one place in Sada where we distributed, the farmers had a lot of lentils that they wanted to sell. So we purchased the lentils from them, and at a fraction of a price that was in the city, for example. And we were able to add lentils to our distribution. In Hajjah, for example, there was a chicken farm, and the farmer came and said he has eggs. So we purchased eggs and distributed eggs. So we have the basic items that we distribute in the basket that includes flour, rice, sugar, oil, and then we use whatever is available locally for protein. And we use that. We purchase it from local, farmers, and we use that and add it to our basic list. And we've done, I think, quite well. We also sometimes support purchasing of medicines. So we will get requests, for example, to the cancer center in Sana'a for children where they ran out of medicine. They had zero medication. So we were able to purchase locally some medicine for them. And the reason it's important to purchase locally because, again, the ports are closed. And for any items to go to Yemen, it takes months, if not years. We got a donation from Water for Life for water filters for Yemen. And these, because of the cholera outbreak, we had 1 million cases. And they sent it to Yemen through Water for Life, through a shipping company to Yemen. In December of 2016, it didn't get to Yemen until August or September of 2017. So it takes that long. And then when it gets there, you still have to clear it, which also is very expensive to clear. And then you need to transport it from the port to wherever you need to distribute it. And fuel right now is scarce in Yemen. The UN says there are only about 4 days worth of fuels in the country. And so for us to move these items from one place to another is very challenging. We also got a donation from AmeriCares of medications for Yemen based on the most acute needs. A lot of it is for chronic diseases, especially cancer and kidney. And we had hoped to send it to Hodeidah. The AmeriCares put it on a ship to go to Hodeidah, and then they were told that the Saudi would not allow that ship to get into Hodeidah. So we had to actually now change it to a ship that goes to Aden, and that was very expensive for AmeriCare because they had to pay penalty to now move it to Aden. And once it gets to Aden, we need to be able to transport it to a lot of different places. I just came back from Yemen. The only airport that the Saudis would allow a flight to go to is Aden. And Aden normally is about a 6-hour drive from Sana'a, where I needed to go. But because there are so many checkpoints between Aden and Sana'a, it took over 10 hours on a private car for me to get there. And there are 4 different groups that control the checkpoints. The first one is a separatist group that are very hostile to the north. They're supported by the United Arab Emirates. The second group is actually Muslim extremists or Al-Qaeda. And they're also supported by the Emirates. And for them, it was very scary to go through their checkpoints because, first of all, I'm a U.S. citizen. Luckily, they didn't realize that. And I only have an American passport. I do not have a Yemeni passport to show them to pass through. But luckily, I did have an ID, a Yemeni ID, although expired, but it still shows that I'm local. And their biggest concern was that I was with a driver alone without a male relative. And so I told them that the driver was my son, just so I'm able to get through. But on our way back to Aden from Sana'a, on my way out of Yemen, we were told that they were going to be very angry with us and that would not work. So we had to drive through the desert to avoid those checkpoints. It took us longer, but we also found another car that had got stuck in the desert. Luckily, we had a big car. We were able to get through the desert. Had we had a smaller car, not a 4-wheel car, we'd have run the risk of getting stuck. And so anyway, it's just, and that's what's happening in Yemen, is that you have these groups that would control what goes in, what goes out. And now if we have the medicine that we need to get out of Aden to the places where we need to distribute it, you have to pay all these checkpoints some money to be able to get it through. So that's one of the reasons I prefer to buy locally, because this way we don't have to worry about all these issues.
And you grew up in Yemen, right?
Yes, I was born and raised in Yemen. I came to the U.S. When I was 17 to go to college. I attended Mills College in Oakland, California, then went to Emory to do my master's degree in public health, and then UNC Chapel Hill for my PhD.
And did you, I believe you said in one of your talks you grew up in Sana'a?
Yes.
Which is the oldest? I didn't know this.
Yes, Sana'a has a beautiful history. Sana'a is one of the most beautiful cities anybody can visit. And I can say that not because I'm biased for Yemen, although I am biased for Yemen. Sana'a is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. And this is a UNESCO designation, not my designation. It has homes that are over 700, 800 years old. And especially in contrast to the U.S., when I would visit old homes like in in Savannah or, St. Augustine in Florida, and they will have an old school, and I go and visit, and I'm like, I grew up in a home that's older than this. So yeah, Sana'a is very old. Yemeni believe that it was built by Sam, the son of Noah, and that's the old name of Sana'a, actually. It's the city of Sam.
All right. And just to put some more perspective on the current situation, 2011 was the Arab Spring.
Yes.
And you had great expectations back then that perhaps things would change for the better.
Yes. Unfortunately, the Arab Spring turned into a very severe Arab winter. In 2011, there were uprising in many of the Arab countries because they wanted to change dictators. And we were all very hopeful. Actually, I was elated that finally there's going to be democracy in the Middle East. And in Yemen specifically. In Yemen, a lot of the people who led the protests were women. And that was very impressive for Yemen. And also because Yemen is a tribal society and everybody is armed. And so to have the women lead the protest meant that they are going to be peaceful protests. They're not going to have, hot-headed men who have weapons and get into fights. And so when Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was the president of Yemen for over 30 years, stepped down, and Hadi took over, and he was supposed to take over only for 2 years, during which there was going to be a government that includes everyone, because there were two groups that were very unhappy with the national committee that was established to reconcile everybody together. One was the separatist group in the south, and then in the north we had the Houthis, who had been fighting with the Yemeni government since actually 2003. And the conflict with the Yemeni government, with the national government, with the Houthis actually started when the U.S. government, invaded Iraq, because they were against the invasion of Iraq in 2003. They had war with the national government, 6 wars actually, between 2003 and 2010. And they were part of the youth movement that was protesting also for a democracy in Yemen. Comes 2014, the Houthis take over the capital, put the president under house arrest. And so the UN envoy to Yemen, Jamal bin Umar, at that point in time, tried to bring all the, parties in Yemen that are in dispute to have a unity government. And up to that point, there was no war. They were, skirmishes, but no real war in Yemen, although people will say otherwise. And then on the night that Ben Omar, the UN envoy to Yemen, announced that the Yemeni agreed on a unity government, the Saudi government invited him to go to Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. And on the 26th of March 2015, they started their air campaign, presumably to dislodge the Houthi from the government. What is sad about it is that they said that the Yemeni government requested that the president of Yemen, in a TV interview, said he was very surprised by the attack, and he was not aware that they were going to attack Yemen. And for me, wars do happen, but the siege to starve a population of 29 million people, that is a war crime. And we all know that is a war crime. You cannot use hunger and starvation as a tactic of war. And that is exactly what the Saudi and the Emiratis, with the U.S. support, are doing. The U.S. government, unfortunately, is supporting the Saudis in multiple ways. They're air fueling their jets when they're bombing Yemen. They're also giving them targets to hit, which really is mind-boggling because they have hit markets, they have hit weddings, even funeral homes, even orphanages. So about 60% of the Saudi targets are civilian targets. Again, so how is the U.S. government giving them target lists when we know, and this is documented by rights groups, that 60% of the Saudi targets are civilian targets? That puts the U.S. government in a place of, assisting in war crimes in Yemen. And as I said, also, we have the siege that's preventing food and medicine and essential goods coming into Yemen. There was the UN Assembly meeting in New York City this week, and organization after organization that's working in Yemen, whether it's the World Food Program or the UN, everybody is saying by the end of this year, there are going to be 5 million children in Yemen who are starving. Currently, there are 21 million people in Yemen, out of 29, the population of Yemen, who are in need of some assistance in Yemen. 8.4 million people in Yemen are at a credible risk of famine. There are more people starving in Yemen than in the whole wide combined today. And this is not because of a natural disaster. This is because of man-made siege and blockade on Yemen. We're in the 21st century. Using famine and starvation to make a population submit is just not acceptable. A New York article came out recently that says the Saudi are starving Yemen to make them submit. The Saudi, when they entered this war on Yemen, they thought it's going to be a 2-month thing, because I heard the Saudi foreign minister in a TV interview early on, and he said, in 2 months we will be done. We are now 3.5 years ongoing, and it's not done. And the more they're not able to win militarily, the more barbaric and inhumane they become in terms of not allowing food and medicine to get into Yemen.
Aren't they also targeting hospitals?
Oh, yes. They have targeted multiple hospitals, and we're not going to talk about the Yemeni hospitals. About 48 to 50% of the Yemeni hospitals had been targeted by Saudi airstrikes, by the way, including schools as well. But I will talk about the MSF hospitals, which is Doctors Without Borders. They have targeted 4 Doctors Without Borders hospitals, which, again, if I remember correctly, when the U.S. by mistake targeted a hospital, bombed an MSF hospital in Afghanistan, there was an international uproar about that. And the U.S. government had to investigate that. Saudis have targeted 4 Doctors Without Borders hospitals, and not a single outrage from any country about that. They also, the MSF had just finished building a cholera center in Yemen, and they bombed it before they even used it, just days before they were going to start using it. Again, because the Saudi targeted the water supplies in Yemen, they also targeted electricity. So Yemen has been without electricity for over 3 years now. Because of that, Yemen experienced the largest cholera outbreak in the world, with over 1 million cases. When I was in Yemen this summer, August and July, a third wave of cholera was starting to take place because we have the rains in Yemen in the summer, and that would, the contamination of water becomes very prevalent. And we know that now we are in the third wave of cholera. And that's, a direct impact of the Saudis targeting the water and electricity. As I said, there isn't anything. There is no red lines for the Saudis in Yemen. They also targeted the 4 cranes at the Hodeidah port, and which limits the ability of ships, the scarce ship that come to Yemen to unload products in Yemen. It's mostly unload because there is nothing to load now from Yemen. And so the USAID, which is a U.S. government aid agency, bought 4 cranes instead of the ones that the Saudis bombed to give to Yemen. These were mobile cranes. The Saudis would not allow USAID bought with our tax money cranes to go to Hodeidah. They held them in Dubai for over 1.5 years. It took Congress and the Senate to insist that those cranes be allowed to go to Yemen. They didn't go back to Yemen until about 2 years afterwards. So that just shows you their determination to burn Yemen to the ground in order to win militarily. And unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult for them to win militarily. The Yemenis are very fierce fighters. They're very strong and independent. And Yemen have never been conquered in its history. And although Saudi have, the best weapons, they actually now, in terms of spending, they are the second to the U.S. in terms of spending for arms. It's more than Russia and China, if you can imagine that. A country as small as Saudi Arabia, and all those weapons that they're purchasing from 37 countries in the world are used to bomb the people of Yemen.
And Hodeidah is the key largest port in Yemen and serves like the largest population.
Yes. So Hodeidah port is the largest port in Yemen. It's the one where 90% of the food and everything that's imported in Yemen gets through. And so it was always a red line during the Obama administration, and all the international agencies had agreed that the Saudis would not target the city of Hodeidah or the port of Hodeidah, because if they do that, then nothing is going to be able to get into Yemen. And yes, we have the Aden port, but it's not equipped to manage large ships or large shipments. And also the other thing is Hodeidah serves the areas that are under Houthi control that are about 70 to 80% of Yemen population. So we have a port that serves up to 80% of the Yemeni population. However, in June of this year, the Saudis and the Emiratis decided that they're going to target Hodeidah. And I don't know how they convinced this administration in this country that they are, within a week, that they are going to be able to capture Hodeidah. And now it's been since June until now, and they're daily bombing on Hodeidah. I don't know if they're sparing the port, but once you have fighting, nothing gets spared. And during the fighting in Hodeidah, they have bombed the fish market. They have killed many fishermen who were trying to get food on the table for their families. They've also, after targeting the fish market, immediately they targeted the hospital where people were, moving the injured and the death to the hospital. I just don't understand. Just really not clear to me why you would target a hospital as people were moving people to the hospital. And on the other thing, they also double tap, meaning they will bomb a place, and once the first responders come to clear the place, then they bomb it again. And they've done that quite extensively in Yemen. And that's probably what they were doing with the hospital instance. And then just this week, while the UN is meeting in New York, they bombed a World Food Program, place where they store storage, where they store food, and they burned food that would have served millions in Yemen. And this is not the first time. This is, I think, the second or the third time where they target a World Food Program food storage place. They've targeted roads that connect cities. They've targeted everything that produces food in Yemen. So my parents who own chicken hatcheries, they had 2 chicken hatcheries, both were bombed and had been not working since, I think, early 2017. They've bombed farms, anything that produces food. And there have been a lot of articles that had come and said they are deliberately targeting food sources because they do want a famine to Yemen. And there was a recent Saudi writer who said that they are doing this purposefully because they think if they starve the population, then the local population is going to they'll be angry with the Houthis, and then they will side with them in fighting with the Houthis. They don't understand that the more they do these atrocities against the Yemeni people are actually now supporting the Houthis because they feel that they've been wronged and that they have been punished. Because the Saudis are angry at one group in Yemen that doesn't even represent 5% of the Yemeni population.
So only a couple minutes left. I want you to tell people how they can, what they can do. But quick question: aren't the Saudis haven't they invested big time in PR firms to make sure this info stays off everybody's radar?
Yes, of course. The Saudis have engaged many PR firms here and in the UK, in this country and the UK. And the Saudi narrative is used in every single article that I read, unfortunately. And it has a lot of myths. One, that Iran has a big role, which is not true. But anyway, that's a big discussion. But in terms of helping Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, our website is yemenfoundation.com. That's yemenfoundation.com. You can either donate directly using our PayPal account, or you can donate through Noor Foundation. And that is a tax-deductible foundation. And they give us 100% of the donation that goes to them. They actually even donate more sometimes. So if somebody donates $90, they will send us a check up for $100 because they don't want to just give us what is received. So I hope that people would support us to make sure that we continue to support the people in Yemen. I also want people to call their congresspeople and their senators to insist that the U.S. stop supporting Saudi Arabia. Representative Adam Smith and 29 other congresspeople just introduced on the 26th of this month Con Resolution 81 to demand that the U.S. government stop supporting the Saudi war and aggression on Yemen. Please call your congressperson and ask them to support that resolution. Again, it's Con Resolution 81.
All right. Well, unfortunately with that, we are out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming and spending time with us today.
Thank you for the chance to speak to the people and let them know about what's going on in Yemen.